especially since we have the on-campus weekend, which is kind of a special treat, primarily also if you are accustomed to taking online courses. So with that, I will turn it over to Luis. Luis, go ahead, please.
Hey, Sharon, how are you? Welcome everyone to Strategic Management. It's a pleasure to have you here. So a little bit about me. I'm Colombian, and I have been living in Boston area for about 16 years now. My background is in insurance. I spent the first part of my career in insurance for 12 years. Then I transitioned to the energy sector, working in managing the risk management and insurance unit of Enel, that is an Italian company here in North America, US and Canada. We have like close to 120 power plants in the US, so it's a fairly large business. On the academic side, I have a bachelor's in economics and international business. I did back home in Colombia. And here in the US, I completed a master at the Extension School for Management. And I have been working with Sharon for about 5 years now. So just wanted to welcome you and let you know that I am here to support you. Feel free to reach out by phone, text, and email. I prefer email than using the Canvas messages. So feel free to send emails to the FAS email address that you all have. Okay, thank you and welcome. Back to you, Sharon.
Okay, Luis, thank you very much. And I wanted to add my view here. Also, if you have any questions at all during the term, or if you need to reach out to us, please do so. We will be here for you. I also would prefer using my personal email to Canvas. You will get a much more rapid response if you use that. So please do take that route if you have any questions. But again, we're here for you we want you to succeed, and we're here to help you throughout the course. Okay, so for our session tonight, basically this is an introductory session. We will go over our different topics that we'll cover in the course. We will first cover a lot of some of the administrative aspects of the course. I know that you all are very interested in the evaluation, in the types of exercises you'll be doing. We'll talk a bit about our on-campus weekend. There will be more to follow on that within the next two sessions. But we will be going over that, including the web conferencing guidelines and the course outline and overview. We'll also take some time to do guidelines for the case study analysis. Now, I expect that many of you have already done a case study analysis. If you haven't, and if you want some additional guidance after what we've gone through tonight and after what we've talked about, please don't hesitate to reach out for me and I will help you with that. We'll also talk about the research projects and the presentations. And then I wanted to bring to your attention the writing resources and use of sources. Please do review this. This has to do with academic integrity. Harvard takes this very, very seriously, and they expect me to enforce their policies. So please do read this. It's only about a page or so, and it can be very helpful in guiding you in your writing and in some of the guidelines that you have to follow. It's also covered in the syllabus, so please do not neglect to do this. And then we will go into our introductory session on introducing strategic management. Okay. So what we'll do is just take a moment here on using the web conference. I expect that many of you, most of you, are not new to web conferencing guidelines. I just wanted to go over this quickly. If you haven't done web conferencing before, please make an effort to take the time and go over the outlines and the guidelines for Zoom. There is a link posted in your syllabus, and that could be helpful to you. Make sure you do check your mic and the speaker before each session. You want to make sure that you don't have feedback on your microphone, and please do use a noise canceling headset to avoid the echo on the conference. It's often very disruptive when someone has an echo back during the web conference, and we want everybody to get the most out of this. So please do check that. Also, turn off the talk and video unless you're using them directly. I will ask you to make sure to use the video when you are doing your presentations, especially at the beginning, in the introductory piece. And please do limit the use of the chat to technical problems or other specific issues. I will not be monitoring the chat session for your feedback, and your input to the chat session is not counted as part of your participation grade. So please do use that if you have technical problems or if you have to reach out to Luis for some other issues. He will be monitoring that chat session. And also, please let us know if the discussion is too fast or too slow. This will be very helpful to us and hopefully helpful to you. And I will be posting the recordings, and that reminds me that I have to get the recording started, which I have not done so far.
I already did, Sharon.
Oh, Luis, thank you so much. Thank you so much for catching me on that. So I will post the recordings for each week. If you need to go back and review something, that's fine. And or if you need to go through any of the slides or whatever, I will also be posting the slides to Canvas. So you can, I normally post these before the class starts, so you can pull those down and review those when you have the opportunity. Okay, a little bit on the course outline. You've seen this, I'm sure. I hope you all have read the syllabus and gone through that. Tonight, of course, we have our introduction to strategic management. Next week, we will talk about the internal environment, that is the internal environment of the firm. So this talks about the different resources and capabilities that the firm, i.e. the company, can draw on within the company boundaries. And then we have the third session. The third session is a preparation for our on-campus weekend at Maxwell Dworkin. And during that weekend, and I will be going over what to expect in the on-campus weekend in more detail, and we'll be going over the agenda for that. And you will have a little bit of time during that session to prepare for the on-campus weekend. But during the on-campus weekend, we have an aggressive schedule. The on-campus weekend is supposed to be aggressive in nature, and it will cover 3 topics: the external environment of the firm, which covers the macro level environment that the firm has to contend with when they are making decisions on their strategy and what to do next in the marketplace. It will also talk about the industry environment. So we'll cover Porter's 5 forces model and some other models as well. And then also we'll be talking about business strategy, followed by business strategy in dynamic environments. So 3 fairly robust topics over the weekend. If you review your syllabus, you'll see that we also have cases to discuss then. We will have some speakers involved other than me. And we will also be doing some group exercises, and there will be a little bit of time for you to work on your projects and your presentations with your group, and more on that shortly. So I would highly suggest that you try to read a bit ahead, because there is a lot of reading associated with this 3-day weekend. And you will need to understand the concepts, and you will need to be able to participate in the case analysis discussions. So please do some reading now, read up front, try to get ahead of it so that you can get the most out of that weekend. Following that, we have a break on the 25th. We won't be holding the web conference, so you can recover from the weekend and start working on some of your other readings for the future classes. After that, we will talk about corporate strategy. Corporate strategy being different from business strategy insofar as it addresses the industries that the firm chooses to participate in. So it's a bit of a different slant, and we'll be going over that during that session. Then we will look at international strategy, which has, as you can well imagine, some different shifts to it than traditional business strategy or traditional corporate strategy. We'll talk about that. We do, of course, have a case that we'll discuss with the international strategy session. And then the following week, we will look at alliances, mergers, and acquisitions. Alliances, we will spend a little bit more time on. I believe we have a separate, I slotted a separate session for that, for our session. Yes, so for our session on October 16th, we will be looking at alliances separately, and then the following week, for session 10, we will be covering mergers and acquisitions. So a couple of different views there on different partnering arrangements and then subsequently acquisition arrangements. Following that, we will be looking at implementation. Implementation is always something that is usually a very interesting discussion because we've all been through it. The implementation of a strategy or a change in the direction of the firm, whether it is for a different process or a different project or absorbing an acquisition or whatever it is, it's usually pretty challenging. And there are a number of different aspects of implementation that we'll be covering then, such as the systems and the processes and the organizational structure and things of that nature that go along with the implementation that normally change and can change very substantially during the implementation of a new strategy. After that, we will be going into corporate governance. Corporate governance is a really important topic. It has been really at the forefront of a lot of discussions for the last, at least the last 20 years, if not more. There is an increased demand for transparency on the part of the shareholders and other stakeholders. There have been a lot of corporate scandals that have brought this to the fore and that have really encouraged additional discussion and additional oversight in corporations. So that will be I'm sure that will be a good discussion as well. And then following that, we will be talking about corporate social responsibility and sustainability. We will address that from different perspectives a little bit earlier in the course, but this particular session is focused on corporate responsibility and sustainability. And then thereafter, we will go into our group presentations. We have basically 3 sessions which are allocated for the group presentations. In the middle of that, we have the Thanksgiving break. So we do have a break on November 27th. And then on December 18th, which is the end of the class, we will not have a class. In lieu of that, I will ask you to turn in your final case studies the night before, and that will be in lieu of the final exam. So no exams in this particular course, but you will be doing some writing, and you will also be evaluated in other areas, which I will go over momentarily. So does anybody have any questions on that? I'm assuming, I'm hoping that you all went through the syllabus, so you should have a pretty good idea of what's going on here.
I do have a question, Professor.
Sure, go ahead, please.
Yeah, is there any guidance about attendance? Because due to the nature of my job, I can take the weekend off for the on-campus, but I would most likely miss the previous Wednesday. So, are you flexible with attendance, or?
You can, I understand that things happen, that you have other work commitments, that some things come up in your personal life and what have you. So you can miss up to 2 sessions without it adversely affecting your grade. But please don't go beyond that, because you'll lose some points if you go beyond that. And I will give you, Lewis and I work very hard to put together your project teams and your case study groups, and we publish the due dates for your deliverables just as early as we can. So you will have a lot of lead time to see when you need to produce things, when it's critical for you to be in class, and what have you. So that should be helpful to you in getting a good grade.
Outstanding, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for the question. I'm sure others may have had that as well. Okay. Now let's talk about evaluation. I'm sure that I know that evaluation is very near and dear to everyone's heart, because everyone, of course, wants to be successful in the class. And here is how the evaluation is broken down. So for class participation, that is 20% of your grade, and that is divided between actually attending the class, which is 10%, and then also participating in the class, which is another 10%. So participating in discussions, participating in the case evaluation, and just generally being engaged. I will say, and please take this to heart, quality is better than quantity. You must not feel that you have to answer every question in order to receive a good grade here. But please do stay engaged and try to participate and give your view, because this is not only important for your grade, it's important for the other participants. And you want that to, you want it to be a good experience for everyone. So that's the participation. I will say I do not publish interim grades on the class participation. So if you want to get an idea of how you're doing in your participation, reach out to me. We can set up a brief Zoom conference, and I can talk to you about it. And I'd be happy to do that. So don't hesitate to do that if you want some feedback around the middle of the class or whatever it is. Okay, the next piece of the grade is the written case analysis. And you will be writing 2 case studies with a partner. Each of them are worth 15% of your grade. We will assign, Lewis and I, and Lewis is the master of this, he's been doing it for some time now, we'll assign 2 students per group to write the cases. Now, if there is someone in the class that you would prefer to write with, please let us know by the end of the week, and we will do our best to assign the 2 of you together to write with. Sometimes you have been in class with others, you are familiar with and comfortable with working with another person. Please let us know who that is. Make sure you reach out to that person before you contact us, so that they're not shocked if we put the 2 of you together. And we will be happy to do that, but please do let us know by the end of the week, because we want to put these groups together as soon as we can in order to publish your schedule to you in terms of when the cases are due as soon as possible. So take advantage of that if you have the opportunity to. The next thing are the group research projects and presentations. They are 20% of your grade. We'll go into more detail on that shortly, but basically we will put together groups of 3 people to work on the projects and presentations. You can, same thing as the case analysis, if you know a couple of other people you would like to work with, please do advise us by the end of the week, and we will pair you up with them. You will have the opportunity to choose your project topic, and really this is really where people usually do very well in the course, because it enables them to conduct some research and analyze a topic that they are particularly interested in, and potentially illustrate it with a company or companies they are particularly interested in. So this is normally a very, very positive experience for people. And so please, if you do have the opportunity to work with someone you know, let us know again on that. But that's 20% of the grade. And those are all of those presentations will be due at the end of the term. And they will be, you will be presenting to the class on those. And then we have the team evaluations. Now the team evaluations are very short evaluations. These are to allow you and to ask you to evaluate your project team members, not your case team members, your project team members. It's a short evaluation, but it's an important evaluation. It's worth 5 points toward your grade. You will receive 5 points by completing the evaluation. Please do not forget to do this. All right. Typically, every term, 1 or 2 people forget to do this. They lose 5 points off their overall grade, and that really can make the difference between one grade and another. So please do remember to do this. We will send out the evaluation. It's an online evaluation. It's a few short questions on each of your team members, and those are due at close of business Eastern Standard Time on Thursday, December 12th, which is the day after the final presentations are due. So the recommendation to you is, after you have presented with your team, just go online and fill out the evaluation form. That's really the best way to handle this. All right, and then we have the final case. Now this is worth 25% of your grade. We ask you to do these individually. Again, they're going to be due directly before midnight on Tuesday, December 17th. The case will be announced about a month before the end of the term, and you must be on time for this. You will get a long lead time to read the case and analyze it. These late cases will not be accepted and will receive a score of 0. There are no exceptions to this. Please do not be late. You will have plenty of lead time on this. The other thing that is very critical here to your grade is the idea of the academic honesty. And you must not plagiarize these cases. I will give you a 0 if you plagiarize your cases, if I find any evidence of plagiarism. This is not necessary. I am sure that all of you can analyze a case. I am sure that all of you can bring some good insight to the case. Please do not take information from anywhere else and claim it as your own. Harvard is very, very focused on this. And again, they expect me to enforce it. So please don't do this. It is exceptionally difficult to recover from a grading perspective from getting a 0 on this case or on the other 2 cases. It's not a good thing. And it is so unnecessary. So do your own analysis and make sure that you don't take information from anywhere else or take analysis from anywhere else. Michael, go ahead, please.
Yes, you said we're not supposed to take information from any other place, but we can have citations, correct?
Not on the cases.
Not on the cases.
Not on the cases, no. The cases are for you to think about what is important and how best to analyze that situation as presented in the case during that time frame.
Okay, thank you.
So yeah, if you have a case that ends in, oh, I don't know, choose a date, 2010 or whatever, don't look out to 2018 and say, oh, by the way, here's what happened then, and I think this was the right thing to do. When you are a business executive, you have the time frame that the within which you need to work in front of you. You aren't usually prescient enough to say, oh, well, 10 years from now, this is probably what's going on. So
Okay.
that's it. So please work within the context of the time frame. And you will need, however, to cite things on the presentation. That'll be very important. But just stay within the confines of the case, read the case, do the analysis. You'll be just fine. Okay, good question. Thank you. All right, anybody else on that? If not, I'll go on into greater detail on each of these areas. Okay.
I actually have a question about the final case.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Is it possible, because I know you mentioned that there's like a month in advance to start working on the case.
That's right.
Is it possible to submit it like an initial draft and get some feedback to make it better?
No, I don't do that on the final case, and primarily because this is in place of a final exam. And I would not review your final exam scores and say, oh, by the way, this one's incorrect or whatever. So this is up to you. Yeah.
Yep, clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so case study analysis. Can you tell me, please raise your hand if you have not done one, and don't feel bad about this because it happens. And I'll help you out. I'll help you through it. So Robert, okay. Okay, no problem. If by the time we get done here, and if after you have read the introductory note on the case method, you're not comfortable with it, schedule some time with me and I'll give you some guidance. So on the case study analysis, there really is no single correct answer to a case analysis. As long as you can make an argument for your position, you're in fine shape. You don't have to agree with me on the case analysis. So you can, just read the case, think about what we've talked about in class, think about what the conditions are within the firm and externally to the firm, and make your best analysis given what you've known there. So look at the situation, consider potential courses of action, and develop your own recommendations. Don't just quote what's in the case. On the case analysis, you don't have a lot of room to write on this. You only have 4 pages to do the actual analysis. You may put in as many exhibits as you choose, which are supportive of your analysis and recommendations. Don't just put the exhibits in to put the exhibits in. Make sure that they support what you're talking about if you choose to include them. Some of the best case analyses I have seen have had 4 pages of text and a very small financial table. So you don't have to spend 15 or 20 pages including exhibits. But if you do include an exhibit, make sure it is germane to what you have talked about in the case. So each of these cases are unique, and here's what the analysis should include. So you need to understand what the current situation of the firm is, what the competitive situation and strategy of the firm is, and then what are the alternatives and recommendations that you have. And the alternatives and recommendations should comprise about half of the writing. So a couple of pages on alternatives and recommendations. You don't want to spend the whole case just reiterating case facts. We all know what the case facts are. So you will need to do somewhat of an introduction to the case. Say this is the situation, this is what the firm is facing. That goes without saying, but please try to spend about half of the time looking at different alternatives and recommendations that the firm could pursue. So it could be there could be a lot of things that the firm could do. They could divest part of their business. They could acquire new businesses. They could get into an alliance with other companies in order to grow their business. Usually within these case studies, growth is often a key factor. What will the firm do to grow their business? So think about that. Think about some of the cases are focused more so on internal aspects of the firm. Think about some of the things that they might do internally. Obviously, I'm not asking you to write these right now, so we'll discuss some of the things that could be done internally as we go on. But think about it from a business perspective. I'm sure that you all have been in the business environment for some time, and you have seen a lot of different examples of what constitutes good business practice and potentially what does not work. So I'm sure that you will have a lot to go on there. And again, there's no single answer. So as long as you can say, well, they should do this because of X, Y, and Z, it's good. I will often say, I do give you written feedback on these, and sometimes I will say, I don't necessarily agree with you, but I take your point, and you don't lose anything from that on your grade. So did somebody put their hand up? I thought I saw a flash on the screen.
Yes, it's me, Kiba.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Hey, how are you?
Fine, thanks.
Quick question. So in previous classes, I've used like a case report or presentation template. Do you prefer that we use one, or do you have a preference that we don't, or do you provide one that we use?
You mean like an outline to follow?
Yeah, pretty much like a template that goes through, the things you're talking about, the environment, the audience, the issue, and then maybe even going through strategic risk, financial risk, operational risk, compliance risk, reputational risk, kind of working through it like a template form.
Okay.
It may not be drafted in that way, but it's a template to help you put it all together.
Okay, I don't have a specific template, but I do have some recommendations within the syllabus. And also, if you read the introductory note on the case method, they will offer suggestions on how to organize the material. Either one of those is fine with me. Just make sure that you include some key factors in setting the tone for the internal and external condition of the firm, in setting the tone for the industry conditions that are going on, and hitting the key points on what you believe that that the firm should do. So read through the syllabus, read that introductory note on the case method. It's a really good note. It's only 6 pages long if you haven't read it already, and take some guidance from there. So I think those are I think that's the best that I can offer to you in terms of a format.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Okay, anyone else? All right. Okay, here are a few other things that may be helpful to you. I've handed this list out in the past, and I've gotten back a list of these questions with some answers. That's not it. This is just to give you an idea of some of the things that you might want to talk about. So, don't worry about answering all of these. This is to kind of spark your thought process and help you get an idea of what you want to write about. I think that why did this problem emerge, and are these apparent problems? Are they real problems or only symptoms of the real problems? Those are a couple of really good ones to think about and concentrate on. And the kind of the rest of it goes without saying in terms of what's going on in the industry and things, because if you think about it, companies are at the mercy really of some industry events that happen. They are somewhat at the mercy of some regulatory issues that come up. They are certainly in play with the competitive environment. So some of these again, kind of go without saying, but if you can try to get to the bottom of it and think about, you know, why did this problem emerge in the first place? Was it that they were that the management was not strong enough to really guide the company through a turbulent time? Was it that they didn't have the appropriate internal resources and maybe they didn't have the right skill set, or maybe they didn't have enough resource to carry the project through? You know, there are a lot of things that that can affect your analysis and your outcome there. So just give that some thought. And I have to say, you know, I've been through I've been through a lot of school. I've been through a lot of graduate programs. And when I was writing case analyses, I was not really excited about it. So I can understand this. But then finally, I got to the point where I said, you know, this is actually kind of interesting because I get to learn about an industry that I didn't know about. And I kind of get the opportunity to look at the problem in a different way. So, you know, that's kind of my thinking on that. Okay. All right. So a lot more of that. I talked about the introductory note on the case method. I just want to emphasize a couple of things. Please do not research outside the case. Here's what that means. Don't go and get the annual report from the company. Don't go and get the 10K or the 20F report from the company. Don't look at what somebody said in Business Week or the Wall Street Journal or another type of analysis. Use your own view to do the analysis, because these cases are really content rich. They have a lot of material on which you can base your analysis. And please do, again, stay within the case time frame. Don't look at a case that is set in 1995 and say, oh, they should use Twitter to do better marketing. No, it's Twitter wasn't around really at that point. So it's, you know, don't really stray outside of that, because it's just not appropriate. And also, please do use spell checker. It is helpful. There's nothing worse than reading along and reading along and reading along, and all of a sudden being stopped in the middle of a sentence and say, what is this person really trying to tell me? And what is this word? And, you know, we have a lot of tools at our disposal at this point. So please do take advantage of those. And also, please do not be late. Please do not be late. You will get just as much runway, just as much time as we can give you on lead time to prepare the case. So try to get a little bit ahead of it. Things come up at the last minute. You don't want to get caught and with 2 hours left to submit the case and a crisis occurs. You just don't want to find yourself in that situation. So please do try to give yourself a time buffer on that. Okay. All right, let's talk a bit about the research projects and presentations. So again, we'll be putting together the groups for the research projects. You may or may not be working with the same people that you worked with on the cases. And we will try to assign groups as soon as possible as well. The survey that you filled out helps us to put the groups together, because we try to get people who have a variety of skills in each group. It's always easier to do these projects, these presentations, when you get somebody who has a different expertise in an area than you do, as opposed to 3 finance people or 3 operations people or 3 marketing people or what have you. It's just a better outcome. Now, Here's the initial challenge. You will need to put together a one-page topic proposal. This does not have to be, I would say try to put the proposal together as soon as you can, because it doesn't have to be perfect. It is not unusual for me to give the proposal back and say, I'd like you to add this, or I'd like you to add that. The important thing is to get started. And I will give early feedback to you if you submit it early. Now, make sure that you include some of the basics, the team member names, the topic, the section number, and 3 to 4 representative sources in the proposal. In terms of sources, I would expect you to, when you are developing these presentations and putting them together, to use sources from a variety of areas. So don't pull three or four sources from Business Week and write about it. Look at academic research. Look at research from current business periodicals like Sloan Management Review or Harvard Business Review. McKinsey does good work. The Stanford Knowledge Base has good work. If you, depending on the nature of the topic that you are covering, you may want to go out to some of the international organizations and pull some research, maybe from the IMF, maybe from the World Trade Organization. You know, there is lots and lots of research out there. So please try to get a kind of a variety in there, because it will give you a better perspective on the topic. Now, the thing is, the topic and the company selection will be approved on a first come, first served basis. There are a list of potential topics within the syllabus. You must not choose one of these topics, but this is to give you some ideas. I will tell you that some topics are very popular, and they usually go first. And it is important that each group gets a different topic, and it's important that people do not repeat the companies that they use to illustrate the topic. Now, you must not use a company example to illustrate the topic. You can just focus on the topic specifically. However, it is often more interesting for you, and also easier to cover the topic and then say, this company is an example of it because, and talk about what the company has done that illustrates whatever your topic is, whether it's competitive advantage or governance or disruptive innovation, or whatever you decide to work on. But it's important to choose this early in the cycle, because you will be in a far better position to actually work on something that you want. So think about that, and also make sure that you don't just choose a company and talk about the company. That's not the point. This is not just a company report. The point is to choose a topic related to strategic management and pursue that topic. And then if you choose to illustrate it with companies, you can do that. But please try to think about that up front, and then send me your one page, because you will, the sooner you do it, the more likely it is that you will get to work on something you are most interested in. Okay, and we can talk about this more later. I know this is a lot to go through at the moment. All right, so in terms of presentation content, these are the 4 key areas that you need to cover. This is basically your outline. You can put other things in the presentation, but you need to cover these 4 topics, these 4 areas within the context of the topic. The second one, key findings in the literature or focused literature review. What this means is you want to identify and do some reading on and research the most prevalent writings in the literature about your particular topic. So in other words, don't talk about competitive advantage and neglect to talk about Michael Porter. or some of the other key voices, I guess you could say, in the area of competitive advantage. Do not choose disruptive innovation and forget about Clay Christensen. You need to take some of the most important findings and make sure that you cover them. They don't all have to be, they can be from a wide range of time. So for example, they don't all have to be things that have been published within the last 2 years. In fact, they probably won't be. So Porter, for instance, covered the 5 forces. He codified the 5 forces in 1979. That was a while ago. People are still using that model to conduct industry analysis. So it's quite okay that you use something from 1979. There are other very famous authors and famous researchers who were publishing strategic management material in the 50s, in the 60s. Don't worry about that so much, but try to get a range of material from what people have been writing about. So, for example, on the competitive advantage, or maybe on some broader topics in business strategy, you'll see that a lot of the foundational research was done in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s. And the things that are coming out now are important, but they kind of build on that foundational research. So, don't worry about having to use only things that are published after 2010 or whatever. Just make sure that you get the most important findings in the literature. So where will you find this? It is not difficult to find this. You can, one of the best search engines is Google Scholar that I've found. It's optimized for an academic environment. You can use other search engines on the internet, whichever you choose. You can one of the things that you can do also is find a particularly good article and look at the different research sources that the authors used. I mean, there are lots of ways to get to the important pieces of material in these topics. And if you have questions, I will be available to answer those questions. Just reach out to me and we'll set up a Zoom conference. Okay, so here's how it nets out. I'd like you to use professional PowerPoint format. Everyone has to present. You cannot all produce content for the presentation and then have one person in your group present it. Everybody needs to present on the web conference, and it is in total 20 minutes plus Q&A. So 20 minutes, about 10 minutes Q&A, and that will be it. Often I get the question, how many slides should I use? That is completely up to you and your presentation style. You can use 20 slides, you can use 10 slides, you can use 30 slides. I would not recommend using 70 slides. You will not get through the material. But depending on your style of presenting and depending on the nature of the material, let that guide what you produce. You will not get more or fewer points for doing a specific amount of slides, but I have had groups that have had 50, 60, 70 slides, and it's exceptionally difficult to get through those in 20 minutes. So be a little cautious of that and when you are trying to put the presentation together. And I know that since most of you are industry professionals, you've probably done many presentations, so I really am not concerned about that in general. And please do send it the night before, because I would like to review it in advance of your presentation. Okay, any questions on that? This will become more obvious as we go along. Okay, so some important dates, and I put these together. You can find these on the Harvard website. You can find these in the in syllabus, but sort of I put them together kind of as a convenience for you. So the course change period ends. Harvard changed their process a little bit on registering and add drop, but here's where the change period ends on September 9th. We are now at the 4th, so that would be on Monday. And then we have our weekend on the 20th to the 22nd. It's our on-campus weekend in Maxwell Dworkin. And how many of you have never been to the campus before? Just raise your hand, please. 2. That's it? 3, okay. All right. There is Maxwell Dworkin is on Oxford Street. It is in the you can find it on a map. It is in the science and engineering part of the campus, and it kind of abuts the law school. So we will. It's a very nice room that we have for the weekend. Please do not be late for the class. The Harvard has made it very clear to me that since you get a resident, this is part of your residency requirement, everyone needs to be there on time and throughout the whole class. So please don't, if you're coming in, if you're driving in or flying in, please leave yourselves a little bit more time and try to make sure that you get in there on time. Maxwell Dworkin, again, it's a very nice room. It's very nice. The room we're in is very nice. We will have a lunch break on Saturday. The best lunch places are about a 10-minute walk from there in the Harvard Square area, and I will try to make sure that you have ample time to get there, eat, and get back. So it is a I think it'll be a very, very good 3 days. Part of that 3 days will be I've blocked an hour for you to work on your presentations. This does not mean you should get together with your group for the first time and decide what your topic is going to be. That's not the point. The point is to either refine your presentation or to work on the actual presentation material. And the latter is better because it'll be far easier to interact with your group and to get some things in place if you do that. And the presentation, that one page, is due when we finish that session. So do not wait until that weekend to work on it, because you won't get it done, basically. And I cannot schedule the presentations until all of the projects are approved. So take into consideration not only your group but some of the other groups as well. And I'll be reminding you of this before our online our on-campus weekend. Who has done a hybrid in here before? Who has done a hybrid course? 2, 3, okay, 7. Wow, 6, 7. A lot of people. Well, that's terrific. So, can we take just 5 minutes here and tell me what you think worked and what didn't? Because this should be a good this should be a good event for you. This should be a good experience. If you saw something that worked really well, tell me. If you saw something that didn't work well at all, please speak up as well.
I'll go, Professor.
Okay, go ahead.
So my first on-campus class that we did, the school had actually scheduled like a happy hour on the first night after class. And that was a lot of fun. It gave us a chance to sort of unwind after there was a lot of people, it was their first class. And so we were able to talk about that and connect over that and get outside of the class a little bit and I felt like it set us at ease for the rest of the weekend. So I think doing something together after class, especially the first night, even if it's just, hey, go grab a beer right down the road, it's really helped us to connect. And the people I talked to that first night later became my group for the class. And then I'm still friends with all of them. We took another class together the next semester just because we were all taking it. So it really helps when you're doing classes online like this. It helps you to have that sense of community, like, hey, these guys are my team, because you don't really get to experience that going online.
Sure. Okay. Well, thanks for the suggestion. Sounds like a good one. Okay. Anyone else?
I'll go.
Okay.
I took marketing management, and something that was really cool was there was like a live case study that, I'm sure you already have the agenda planned, but we had a representative from a well-known company that came and gave a situation where they faced an issue, and we got to ask questions and they got to provide real answers. So we kind of did like a live exercise case study, which was probably my favorite part of that course, or of that on-campus weekend. So I really enjoyed that.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you for the input.
Yeah.
Anyone else? These are all good suggestions. Okay. Katie, did you have something else, or maybe that maybe the raised hand is just left over?
Nope.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Okay. If you can think of anything that didn't work, you can always send me an email afterwards, and I'll take that under account. Okay, so just to kind of wrap up here, Katie, did you have something else? This thing keeps popping up to say that you wanted to say something. So.
No, sorry, I don't know why it's doing that. I'm not pushing anything.
I don't either. I have to say, someday it's just a bad day for technology. So it's you have to put up with that on these things. Okay, but thank you. All right, so at the end of November, you have the last day to withdraw from a class. I hope no one has to do this, but it is it's an option for you if something completely unanticipated happens in your life, in your job, and whatever, and you just can't get the work done. So it's at the end of the day, it is better to withdraw than to fail because you cannot get the work done. So if by chance you need to take advantage of it, please do it. And again, I hope you don't have to use that option. All right, and then just to wrap up here on the course requirements. Okay, you see the dates for the group presentations, when the team evaluations are due, and when the final case is due. So I think that that's all pretty clear. We'll mention these dates again on and off as we go through the term. And I think that it might be a good idea to take a 5-minute break now. So please, get a coffee, stretch your legs, come back at 5 minutes past the hour, and we'll go into our material for the first session. Thank you. Okay, everyone, welcome back. At this point, I'd like to start into our topic for today, which is kind of an overview of strategy and some of the different aspects of strategy that we will be covering during the term. So here's the situation. The concept of strategy really isn't new. In fact, it's been going on for thousands of years, and it has its roots in basically the military. And so as you see, it's the general's view. It implies a broader, more holistic view of the situation versus a more tactical focus, which is where the specifics of the execution piece come in. So there are these military origins of strategy go across cultures. I give you here a quote from Sun Tzu. Any of you who are consultants have, I am sure, read Sun Tzu in The Art of War. It's kind of required reading for people who take on a consulting role. And so you see, this whole idea and this whole concept has been going on for quite some time. However, business strategies and academic discipline really didn't take hold until the last few decades. So if you compare it to philosophy or psychology or some of the sciences, it's really rather new to the playing field in terms of being studied in the university and being followed as an academic discipline. So it really gained a lot of traction since 1960. And around about that time, people like Alfred Chandler and Igor Ansoff started writing about it and started codifying it. And they took these are some different approaches that were taken over the years. Now, this timeline goes from the 1960s through the 1990s. That doesn't mean that no new ideas came out after 1990. This is just the scope of this timeline. And it's also when a lot of the really foundational material was developed for business strategy. So you see here, the first two are pretty much internally focused. They look at the classical one looks at strategy from a more formal perspective. It looks at strategy from the perspective of internal planning, profit maximization. It's very analytical. A lot of the models that we will talk about during this term came out of this area. And here you see some of the key authors. I mentioned Chandler and Ansoff Porter, who started writing a lot in the late 70s and 80s and still is writing a great deal, are representative of this era. You then go to processual, and the processual was more internally focused. So it looks more about the learning perspective of strategy. It looks more about the cognitive view of strategy. We will talk about this when we do the internal perspective, which is next week, and we will talk about it. It's sometimes called the RBV, or the resource-based view of the firm. And it has its roots more so in psychology. And there you see some of the key authors. If you read some of the literature that was developed in the 70s, you'll see quite a hot debate between people like Mintzberg and Porter, or Mintzberg and Ansoff and some of the others. So it was just a kind of a shift in the way academicians and researchers were looking at strategy development. Now, when you go into the 80s and the 90s, you start to see things that were more externally focused. So you get an evolutionary approach followed by a systemic approach. And the evolutionary approach is more Darwinian in nature. It's more survival of the fittest. It looks more at markets. So it's more externally focused. And I've included some of the key authors there. And then the systemic one, it was more externally focused from the standpoint of societies. Now, we'll see a little bit later that this whole societal view was not new at all, but it just took hold more so in strategy around about the 1990s. So you see there's been quite the evolution. And it has kind of formed a basis for the work that has been done since the turn of the century, which is more so often more creative in nature. It looks at what to do in more dynamic and turbulent environments, and it looks at more what to do in design-focused environments, and also it has a lot to do with the technology focus as well. So we'll be talking about all of that as we go through the semester. So there are a couple of sort of high-level pieces of strategic management, strategy formulation, which goes into strategy formulation and implementation. So this top piece, the formulation piece, is the analysis piece, and is the overall creation of the vision and mission. So looking at the internal and external environment is pretty critical. I know that we will go over some models. As I said, the 5 forces model was codified in 1979. Some of these models were codified, way before the turn of the century, but they form a good basis. And until you understand how to use those, really, you kind of can't get past that and look at something that's more 21st century oriented, because you can't ignore the internal environment, you can't ignore the external environment, and having the basic tools to understand how to analyze them and confront the challenges associated with them is very, very, very important. Also in this formulation piece, you have creating the vision and mission, and sometimes the creation of and the use of vision and mission statements are very much maligned. And I think that it is, well, sometimes it's with good reason, because some vision and mission statements are not very well crafted. And then they somehow dilute really what the company is stands for, and which is the mission statement, and where the company wants to go, which is the vision statement. But if there is a lot of thought put into the vision and mission, they can be very, very powerful, because they set the tone for the organization, and they act as very, very good communication mechanisms. So more on that shortly. Below the line, you see we have implementation, and implementation has to do with a lot of different operational aspects of executing on the strategy. So the implementation levers that you find there, again, have to do with organizations. They have to do with metrics. They have to do with processes and systems, and clearly strategic leadership, because without very strong strategic leadership, you are probably not going to be successful in your implementation. And then we see some various areas of strategy. We're going to be taking a look at a model that goes through all of these. And basically it's focused on how the firm will achieve its objectives. So here is a model which takes a look at those aspects that were on the bottom in the implementation area, and there are many models that one can use in trying to focus the strategy, and in trying to define the strategy, and in trying to understand which elements need to go into strategy consideration. I like this one in particular because if you take a look at these different areas, you're not going to miss too much. So I'd like to just go around the kind of around the diamond here and talk about these a little bit. So the first one is the arenas. Where will the company be active, and with how much emphasis? So which products are you going to bring into the market? What channels will you use to get them into the market? Which market segments will you address? What about the geographic areas? Are you going to remain in your local region or your home country, or will you choose to expand internationally? Which core technologies will you use, and which value creation strategies? So the arena piece is pretty basic, and it's pretty important. And then you go on to the vehicles. So how will you actually achieve this? Will you do internal development? Will you invest in your own R&D? Will you go out and create joint ventures with one or more other companies and share in the profits or the losses of this new company? Will you do it through licensing or franchising? Will you do it through experimentation, or will you acquire? And the number of acquisitions that have been going on for the past few years has really been tremendous. There is a lot of acquisition activity. I'm sure you have observed it in the marketplace in many different industries. And the acquisition activity is often can be beneficial for an industry, or it can be detrimental to an industry. So if you think about some of the really large acquisitions that have happened recently, some of the cable companies, for instance, and some of the other ones, what happens is that you really concentrate the industry. So maybe you are now in a duopoly situation where you have a couple of really, really large companies that are controlling most of the industry. And when that happens, you get less competition and you get less choice in terms of the buyers. And the buyers can be other companies, they can be consumers, they can be governments, they can be academic institutions, and what have you. So the whole acquisition arena the whole acquisition area really can be very impactful in terms of changing the nature of the industry. So then you go down to differentiators. How will the company be successful? Will they differentiate and really succeed through their image, through customization, price, styling, product reliability? There are many different aspects of a company's differentiation and differentiators that can make the company successful or not and make them stand out in the marketplace. Now we're going to economic logic. And economic logic, as you see, is the one in the middle. That's a very important one, of course, because it is how the company earns money. How will the returns be obtained? Will you choose a low-cost strategy? Will you choose a differentiated strategy? There are, depending on which two of those high-level choices you make, it will permeate throughout your choices and your decisions in the organization. So it's quite critical to understand up front what you're going to do here. Now, I've been talking about choices which companies make when they are really starting out. And to be very clear, companies don't always have that luxury. And you, as a strategist, you don't have that luxury necessarily either. So it's not often that you get a blank sheet of paper and can go into a company and say, okay, here's what we're going to do. You normally have to deal with what exists in the company and what strategy that the company has been following. So it's always a bigger challenge than starting out from scratch, so to speak. And then we get on to staging. And I think really staging is the most difficult one. And that is what will be the speed and sequence of moves in the marketplace. When do you want to expand? When do you want to go out into the market with a new product? When do you want to go internationally? When do you want to make a critical acquisition? It is sometimes very difficult to call this. And I have seen throughout my career companies which have misfired on the staging piece of it, and it's really been to their detriment. So for example, if you are bringing a new product or a new technology to the market, there are a number of things that you have to consider, such as, is the buyer base ready to buy and consume this product? The answer may be no. And this is something you have to take care to really evaluate before you go to the market. The other thing too is that, is the buyer base ready to consume it in terms of the existing products they have? So if the products are not at end of life, if they still have a lot of business value in them, if the companies are not prepared to go through the change that will precipitate when they change a technology or change a process or what have you, then it is likely that the the staging decision is not, this decision is not occurring at the right time. And it's hard to call this correctly. I've seen companies that have gone into the market too soon, and their competitors have gone in maybe a couple of different, a couple years later, and they have been much more successful. So, Kiba, did you have a comment there?
Yeah, my question is, does this apply to like technology releases? Like, does this apply to like technology releases, like how Apple releases the new iPhone or whatever new technology? Is it the same idea, or are we just talking about company expansion?
No, it can apply to that too. Now, it's interesting with Apple, and it's interesting with some of the newer consumer electronics, because they are often in an environment where they offer something to people who don't know that they want it or need it yet, but it becomes so attractive to them that they go ahead and purchase it. In some other areas, if you look at the products, it could be that the companies, those are basically consumer based. I mean, yes, companies can buy hundreds or thousands of smartphones for their employees, but often if companies are investing in sort of more capital intensive purchases, they're going to look at it differently than, oh, isn't this cool technology? So it is, the staging can refer to expansion, it can refer to new technology releases, it can refer to a lot of different changes that the company makes. And the example that I alluded to did happen in the tech sector. It was a situation whereby one company was trying to go into the market with a new platform. The buyers were really not ready to consume it. The launch subsequently failed in large part due to the timing. And then 3 years later, their main competitor came out at a time when the existing technology was going out of rev, was being sunsetted, and the computing environment had changed to the point where these new technologies are really needed in the business environment. So it was a much better timing call, and this is hard sometimes. Okay, who else has a view here?
Yes, I do have a question. So, would your example be? Are you talking about Netflix and the previous company that tried a video streaming service, or that's a different case?
Which previous company were we talking about? It wasn't Blockbuster.
So, right way before Blockbuster, there was a streaming service where you could like watch movies online, but that was way before broadband internet, so they failed, and Netflix kind of came later on, and
Yeah.
they're obviously doing well now.
Sure. Yeah, that can be a good example of it, because so many things changed from the 1990s up into the 2000s in terms of streaming and internet usage and e-commerce and on and on and on, all the things that related to broadband, familiarity of consumers with its usage, speeds, pervasive availability of these technologies. And if that's not in place, if that infrastructure component and if the ease of use and the knowledge of use is not in place, whoever comes in first is going to be disadvantaged, unless they have such a huge investment bucket that they can really wait it out. But that is one thing. And if you think about how e-commerce evolved and how some of these other internet-based technologies evolved, you just think about what had to be in place in order for that to become widely accepted and pervasive, you can think about the choices that the companies had to make there. Yeah, and we're still at the point in some areas of the world where it's not readily available. So you really have to pick and choose on how you're going to enter these markets.
One good example also, I think, relevant to internet pages or businesses is just the abstract of the arena. Because, for example, Facebook was not the first social media website, but they started out by focusing on Harvard students, trying to create a reputation as prestigious or whatever to differentiate themselves. Then they expanded to universities, and then finally it became available to anybody.
Okay. So the idea is that it started in one environment and then grew to others, or?
Well, no, the idea is that, especially now in today's modern technology or modern economy, business is not so much focused on fixed locales, but I think the dynamics of the internet change. It becomes a little bit more abstract how your business evolves on a structure wise, and then you also have to start looking at it from a perspective of groups of people that are being targeted. Because, for example, anybody can buy from Amazon, right? But to buy from Walmart, you need to be able to get to a Walmart. Or I mean, now they're trying to expand their website, but originally, the brick and mortar locale is not. It's kind of fading away.
Okay, yeah, and with the widespread use of the internet for commerce, especially in the consumer arena, it makes a big difference. If you were in a more capital intensive environment, the internet would play some part in it, but you have to make different choices in that area. So anyway, okay, thanks for bringing that up. Anybody else? Okay, let's move on. All right, a bit on strategy coherence here. Again, we see our diamond, but the whole idea is that all of these areas have to be aligned. If they are not in sync with one another, and if they do not support one another, something will break and the strategy will not be successful. And in addition to that, within the company, within the different functional areas, they all have to be aligned as well and be supportive of the overall strategy. So it's something that's should be very carefully watched. I am sure that you have been in, many of you have been in situations whereby the metrics for the marketing organization and the sales organization and perhaps the professional services organization have not really supported each other. And the company doesn't really do as well, and it's not really as successful overall when these types of things happen. So it's quite critical to keep an eye on this and to make sure that each of the different functions support one another in terms of their actions and in terms of their metrics. Okay, so strategy and implementation iterate. It's one informs the other, basically. So you see here, Walmart is a pretty basic example of what happens here. They had chosen to compete as a discount retailer in rural markets. In order to do that, what do they have to do? What do companies have to do anyway if they are if they compete on cost, if they're a low-cost provider? What else has to be in place there?
Source goods locally.
Excuse me?
Would that be sourcing goods locally?
That helps for sure. That helps for sure. If they can't source goods locally, they have to have a very good distribution network. They have to have a large, low-cost labor force. They have to have systems and processes which are very well refined, because if you're competing on low cost, you have to have a lot of volume, and it implies that you don't have a lot of margin in the products that you are selling. So everything has to be as streamlined as possible in order to make profit. And companies learn these things as they go along. So this is the whole idea of the iteration here. One thing informs the other. And this is, I think the Walmart situation is a pretty obvious example of that. Okay, let's talk about for a moment about corporate level and business level strategy. So what's corporate level strategy? Corporate level strategy differs because it looks at the different industries and markets that companies compete in. And the idea here is that these, if you choose to go into different markets, in particular, if you choose to have a diversified strategy, the different businesses, ideally, that you have under your portfolio should support each other. They shouldn't just, it shouldn't just be additive. And that is, that's often something that, you know, requires some energy and thought and a good corporate level strategist. But if you look at business level strategy, it's really about competing in a specific market. How do you do it today, and how do you do it in the future? And you, in some ways, look at some different elements that you would particularly focus on in terms of corporate level strategy. And we will be going over these much more specifically, both when we go into the on-campus session and then subsequent to that. Okay, let's talk just for a moment about strategy implementation. So this is the implementation piece, is where you take the strategy and you have to translate it into executable actions. And this is always easier said than done. It's one thing to sit in a big room with a whiteboard with your colleagues and lay out the strategy. It's another thing to actually make it happen. Why is this so difficult? Well, there are a wide range of reasons. For one thing, the markets don't stand still. Your competition doesn't stand still. And the competitive dynamic is usually changing. And also the market forces are usually shifting. So you have to be prepared to deal with that. The other thing that you have to be prepared with to address is that when you get to the implementation piece, of course, you have an organization, i.e. people, the employees of the firm, who have to really execute well in line with the strategy in order for the implementation to be successful. And a change in the strategy can often be create a lot of dissonance. It can be threatening to some people, and it's sometimes not always well communicated. So there are lots of changes down the road there. But we will go into that quite a bit more as we go through the term. So here we go. A little bit more on the markets and competitors that don't stand still. And typically you talk about strategy in terms of an intended strategy and then a realized and emergent strategy, which is what happens when you confront these different market forces and different shifts and changes in buyer behavior and a whole host of other things. So here we have the key components of implementation. And as I mentioned earlier today, the implementation levers, which is typically thought of in the organizational structure, the systems and processes, and the people and the reward systems. And then the strategic leadership. And the strategic leadership is such a critical component, because this is where the final resource decisions are made and the final allocation decisions are made. And also, of course, the leader sets the tone for the organization. So in the absence of strong leadership that can lead the organization into a new strategy or whatever change or shift is required, it will be a lot less likely to succeed. All right, so a question for you all. What makes strategic planning so difficult? We have 9 different items here. This is not an exhaustive list. This is a list which, with some of the more popular reasons for strategic planning being so difficult. So take a moment here and read through the list and tell me which one of those or ones of those resonate the most with you. I'm sure you've all seen some of this happen. Okay, we have a few hands up.
1, 5, 6, 9.
1, 5, 6, and 9. That's quite a few. Do you have
which ones resonate the most, right?
Yes. Do you have a favorite among those?
A favorite. Yeah, I would say 1. I think 1 is probably the most common.
Okay. They're not necessarily customer driven. That can be a very, very, very big issue, and it does come up pretty often. 5, I think, is also a good one, to your point, because there is a tendency toward stretch objectives and going the extra mile and really not facing reality when it comes to what is actually going to take to execute on this new plan. So that's a very, very tough one. Okay. Who else do we have? My display really isn't cooperating very well. Okay, one moment. Jomara?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
I was gonna say 3 corporate strategists are removed from daily activities, and not from recent experience, but back when I used to do something like being bartending. I remember the managers and the architects, they would all get together and like lay out this bar and how it's gonna run and how it's gonna work, but none of them were bartenders, and none of them understood like that the bottles didn't fit in the rails because they made all of the rails the same size, or all of the shelves the same size, and alcohol bottles are different sizes. And it just seemed like they were so far removed from like the daily activities of a bartender that they were all strategizing how this bar was going to be so magnificent, but it really didn't work at all.
So it was completely unrealistic design.
Yes.
Yeah. These things can happen. I mean, sometimes when you read that being removed from daily activities, you get this vision of some guys in suits in a big tower in the corporate headquarters, sort of concocting these strategies and not really getting out and looking at what the customers need or what the operations need, or anything else. So that can be pretty difficult. Okay.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you. Okay, Jen, go ahead, please.
I guess mine was number 2, and with regard to it not being discussed within all lines of business or articulated properly, and then there's some discord going on within certain sectors, and it can cause issue.
Okay, good. And there's actually been some research done on the fact that this lack of clear articulation is a communication issue. And there was a really interesting piece that came out recently that talked about how the communication fails at different levels of the organization. So it's a tough one. I mean, the people, this has to be reinforced a lot, and it also has to be really clearly understood at people at every level of the organization. So how am I contributing to this, and what does this mean for me? And that doesn't always happen. Okay, thank you. Gina, go ahead, please.
Yeah, my favorite is number 4. I've worked in organizations where we've had elaborate strategic planning meetings and retreats, and the company spent tens of thousands of dollars on these strategies. But then at the end of the session, it's like they're put into a binder and you don't see them until 5 years later when it's time to plan again, and the implementation may or may not actually happen.
Yeah, so it's like, okay, we did this. There's our results. And
Yeah, it's
then
more of an exercise than an actual strategy implementation exercise.
Yeah, exactly. And it's clearly easier to go on with business as usual than it is to really affect a big change. And the kind of related thing to that is that people become wrapped up in conducting business as usual, making the quarterly earnings, on and on and on, and then nothing really significant happens because they're just trying to keep the business moving, basically. So that's a tough one as well. Okay, thank you. Robert, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, so for us, it's definitely a new CEO or business leader arrives. I've seen it in my 5 years at my current company, WellPet. We've had a complete turnover of the senior leadership team. So every year, there's at least 2 new people on the board, on the the executive team, and that makes for changing strategies. And then you end up not implementing any strategy and just reacting to what's going on in the outside world.
Yeah, exactly. And it's this one is a tough one because anybody who's done consulting knows that once you lose your sponsor, it's pretty much game over if you're not really instilled in if you're not really in the organization very, very deeply. And with the new business leader arriving, often this is by choice, and often it is at the direction of the board. So sometimes when new business leaders arrive, I think the desired end result is that you bring in somebody who can make a change because there's an issue going on in the company. They're not meeting the growth objectives. They're not going in the appropriate direction. They're not doing this, that, or the other thing. Okay, so they remove the CEO. They bring in someone else, and they subsequently, of course, bring in their own team. And this is usually exceptionally disruptive to the organization. If you do this incorrectly, you get rid of the institutional knowledge. So it's difficult even to keep the organization running. And this can be a really tough one. I mean, if it's done well, it can be very beneficial to the organization, but unfortunately, that doesn't always happen.
Well, yeah, and to follow up on that, it's interesting. So our business, we're kind of unique. We're privately held, but we have a holding company that has its own executive small team. And so our CEO was promoted to the holding company CEO, and then somebody from the internal team became our new CEO. And it's made an interesting transition where, so there's some consistency, but then there's also there's pressure from the top because they're too close to the business in some ways. And so the tension there.
Yeah, a lot of tension there. Okay, thank you. Sean, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I keep focusing on number 6. This is something that I have seen so many times where in a business, we feel like we're simply adapting to circumstances, but in the process of that, it goes beyond adaptation into ending up operating in a non-strategic way, where the fundamental plans can be randomized by simply the situation, whatever situation is requiring a change, and sometimes that can be very disorienting, and then over time, I would say, can almost lead to the perception, not that you'd start with this perception, but lead ultimately to the perception that no strategy is being followed or followed consistently.
Mm-hmm. which is also tough because the organization loses confidence and nothing gets done at the end of the day. So that's a very difficult one too. Okay, thank you. Rizwan, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah, I think for me, it has been number 7 and 9. Historically, I've seen, being in the tech industry, strategies keep changing because technology changes. And with technology change, there's a total disruption in the approach and the cycles and the product development cycles, specifically because it's basically a re-engineering effort that goes in to rebrand, to restructure, and reprioritize everything, right? The leadership change is another one that I've seen, especially being in large Fortune 50 companies, massive global organizations. A new leader arrives and they have definitely a new vision statement that comes out. And it kind of trickles down in the leadership chain, which not only changes the strategy, but also sometimes changes the culture of the company. So very disruptive in so many ways.
Yeah, it does. It can change the culture of the company, and sometimes that is intentional, and sometimes it isn't. Right. And it is, you know, it's a really difficult one to call. Okay, thank you very much. Who else do we have here? Sean, we got you. There's one. Michael, go ahead, please.
I had a long career in IT, and it was number 3 and number 5. They would have no people, the corporate strategists would not understand the kind of resources you needed that we might not have, and the skill sets to implement. You'd have to have new systems to match the new strategy. And they didn't understand that and what we were doing on a daily basis to keep things running that they were going to detract from with their new strategy.
Okay, yeah, and that's a very tough one, because if you don't understand what needs to be done actually to get this implemented, you're going to have very little chance of succeeding. Right. And usually usually when you come in with a reasonably large change, a lot of things need to shift. Mm-hmm. You know, the processes need to shift. Probably it's possible that the relationship between the sales organization and the services organization shifts. You know, the metrics have to shift. I mean, it's a lot to do at once, and these things don't happen overnight. So it often takes some years, depending on the size of the organization and the nature of the change, to actually achieve this, and that can be exceptionally unsettling to people, and a lot of people will likely leave because of that. But in any case, this is one of the fallouts of it. That's what happens. Okay, thank you. Vinya, go ahead, please.
I think one of the bigger ones that I felt was pretty was number 6. I think a big thing is if you're not like proactive, you're constantly reacting to situations, just like it talks about. But to really get ahead and to really implement a strategy that's, you know, concrete, it's way more important to be ahead of it than to constantly react, because you're always catching up to different scenarios and you're not able to, you know, be apt in terms of, you know, getting ready to tackle it appropriately.
Yeah, the reactive piece is tough, because sometimes the executives are so pressured by the market that they feel compelled to react, and this reactive aspect of it is you know, very, very unsettling to the organization. And after a while, people don't know what's expected of them and how to behave, and it's like, oh well, here's another change coming down. And that is that's greatly disruptive to getting anything done in the long term, because you're just reacting to market events, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Jenny, go ahead, please.
Hi, I was gonna add on to number 7, because I noticed, like with the MBTA and Keolis is contracted, and they're always looking for new innovative ideas, like strategies like to reduce costs and things like that. So I feel as if a lot of companies look for new leaders to change, to find ways to be more innovative, or to find better ways to save costs, to cut costs.
Okay. Okay. And to be fair to these people, that's probably what they're paid to do. But it still can be, if it's not rolled out properly, it can still be detrimental to the operations. All right, thank you, thank you. Badir?
Yeah, hi. So for me, I guess it'll still be number 7 because I worked in a company which was an event rental facility, and we worked in the marketing department, and we would try to bring in different proposal or research proposal how to improve lead generation, get more customers coming in. But the CEO was like on a different page altogether, and he would sort of completely reject our approach, saying it's not feasible, it would be too costly. Even though we did all the math, say we would at least reduce our costs, improve revenue generation, but it was completely dismissed. So I guess the disconnect between the department and the CEO is like one of the main challenges for why we don't see new strategy being, I guess, accomplished in everything. So.
Okay, yeah, and it seems that number 7 is a pretty popular one today, but I think it's pervasive, so I'm not surprised about that.
I agree,
okay.
no doubt about that. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay.
I'm sorry to jump in. I'm still figuring out Zoom. I agree with Sean and Vinya about number 6, but also when leadership changes, it affects the entire plans that we've worked with many projects, and almost always project doesn't go as plans, and I would assume that the same with businesses.
Yeah, I think that's safe to assume. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Martin, go ahead, please.
Yes, so there's an old military maxim that is that as soon as you make a very elaborate project or plan, and I'm referring to point number 9, is that you develop a very elaborate plan, and as soon as it's time to implement it, things on the ground just completely change. I mean, it's the business environment and just life in general is very fluid, and so I think that number 9 is the most relevant reason in my view.
Okay, that's a good point. And if you think about it, it's how do you defend yourself against this? And the one thing that you can do that sometimes is helpful is to do some scenario planning. So what happens if we see this shift competitively? Or what happens if we see this shift in the environment? Or what happens if we get a new regulation that we can't react to? Or, I mean, the list is long. It can go on and on and on. So that can be somewhat helpful, although you can't usually anticipate everything, especially if you get some sort of a force majeure type event in the business environment that everyone is trying to determine how to react to it. So that's a tough one as well. Okay, thanks for that. All right, Katie, are you?
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, I had a similar one to Mike for corporate strategies removed from daily activity number 3. I feel like, corporate priorities get made, or like strategic priorities get made by the company. And then when you can't implement them, it also causes a disconnect with how the majority of the company feels about like the mission in general, because the strategies implemented by, the corporate strategists at the top think about the mission in a different way than the people down, kind of on the ground. And so I think it just creates like a disconnect culturally too, and just causes a lot of problems that way. And yeah.
Yeah. So this is not unexpected, because if you think of all the different layers of the hierarchy that you have in a company, the actions are going to look and translate to something very different for different people in the organization. So unless it is, unless it's pretty well coordinated, unless it's pretty clear what the desired end result is, it's going to cause a lot of tension there, and a lot of disconnect between the people in the firm. Okay, do we have? Let's see if we have. Do we have anybody else here? We've had a lot of people participate. I think we have time for maybe one other comment. Teo, go ahead, please.
Yes. So I'm finding it difficult to wrap my head around number one, because most my view on this is most companies, they focus on their customers, even the nonprofits, the 501s, customers like the main factor in how they go about their business, right?
Well, I think that there is a lot of room for error there if you are not really, if you don't make a real active attempt to focus on your customers and their changing needs, and even if you're a nonprofit, they're changing potentially their changing motivations for funding you and volunteering in your organization, and doing whatever it is. So it's I think there's again a lot of room for error in that whole scenario, because if you don't stay on top of this, you're going to miss the changing customer needs thing, and your competitors who do will simply eventually run you out of business. So it's that's a tough one too. But in any case, I think we're coming up to the top of the hour, and I would like to thank everybody for their great comments and for their participation, and also for your questions. So I will. I like to try to end on time, so I will leave you to the rest of your day or evening, such as it is. And we will be finishing up on this topic and also looking at the internal environment next week. So think about, we will get to you as soon as possible on your case teams and also on your presentation groups. Luis, how are we doing on the surveys? Do we have everything that we need to put those together?
I haven't checked if everyone completed, but if there's some of you that have not completed the survey, please do it. I know there's someone that signed up for the class just last night who sent me an email. I will email you back later the link to complete the survey. If anyone do not have the email, send me an email and I will send you that accordingly.
Okay, great, thank you. And the sooner we get all of that in, the sooner we'll be able to give you some visibility on your schedules. So thanks again, everyone. Remember, if there's someone you want to work with in the class, do let us know, and we'll try to make that happen. And in the meantime, have a good rest of your week and the weekend. I will look forward to meeting you again on the web conference next week. And then we'll, following that, we'll start working up to our weekend in Cambridge. If you have any questions in the meantime, please get a hold of me or get a hold of Luis, and we'll be happy to help you. Thank you.